Exercise 1.
So, Nick, you've worked as an environmental scientist in Australia.
Yeah, I have. I worked in my hometown in Tasmania. And in Tasmania, there's many environmental issues, particularly involving logging of the native forest there.
Oh, logging.
Yeah, logging.
I recently heard about logging problems in Belize, in Central America. But what kind of logging issues do you have in Tasmania?
So in Tasmania, there's some very old forests, maybe hundreds of thousands of years old, and some companies are destroying them, clear felling the forest, parts of the forest there.
Really? What are the companies using the forest for?
To make paper,
trees?
actually, to make wood chips and then turn the wood chips into paper.
So they're all paper companies?
They're paper companies.
Oh, really?
Or paper companies in the end. So initially, the loggers, the people which log, go in, they take the trees to a big industry, which then break them into wood chips and then make them into paper. And my job was to try to find out about how we could minimise the destructiveness of that operation.
So what kind of destructiveness would the impact of having deforestation in Tassie?
In Tassie. Well, there's like many animals die, obviously, and much biodiversity is taken away. But there's ways to change that process and make it better. So some solutions are, instead of clear felling, just destroying the entire forest section, just take sections out of the forest. Make the forest look like maybe a checkerboard. So you only take patches of forest, small patches, and hopefully don't kill too many animals in the process.
But wouldn't that still destroy a percentage of wildlife living in those patches?
Yes, yeah, it will, but we still use paper everywhere in the world. So if we use paper, well, the trees need to come from somewhere. So we need to get the best practice possible
I
in our
see.
forest. So it's a bit of give and take.
We can't stop using paper, right?
Oh, I think we should stop using paper. I think we can, but
Right.
yeah, at this stage, it's difficult. Maybe.
Exercise 2.
So who are some of the people that are fighting to protect these trees besides you as an environmental scientist?
Well, in Tasmania, the first Green political party was developed. So, yeah, they obviously want to protect the forest a lot and have big protests, tie themselves to trees, sit up in trees to protect the trees.
People actually still do that, tie themselves to trees.
Every day in Tasmania.
Oh,
seemingly.
really?
Yeah, it's a big issue, a very big issue.
That's interesting. I once heard of a girl who lived in a tree for a month because she wanted to stop the deforestation company or people from taking down that tree. So she lived up there and she had people bring her supplies, but she never came down.
Really? That happens in Tasmania as well. There's people today which are up in trees, maybe up to 50, which permanently live up in trees.
Wow.
Yeah, so I don't know how they do it, but
that's kind of crazy. So, Nick, from the company's point of view, playing the devil's advocate here, I think they provide jobs for all the people who are working to make trees into paper. What do you think they have to say about that?
Well, it's true they do provide jobs, and some cities, some small towns do rely on logging industry to provide jobs. Yeah, and support the shops in the place. But yeah, also tourism is a very big industry in Tasmania, and maybe the logging industry takes away tourist jobs as well, because it makes certain areas not useful for tourism anymore, not very pretty. Yeah,
you're right. If a whole forest is missing, I guess nobody would really want to go and look at anything.
Yeah, there's some very beautiful spots in Tasmania which have been maybe tarnished a little by the logging industry.
Exercise 3.
So, Nick, let's talk about touching and holding hands and physical touch with your significant other. Do you and your partner hold hands when you go out in the street?
We hold hands all the time. Initially, when we first went out, holding hands was the first thing we did. They've progressively moved on from there to kissing, but holding hands was certainly the first thing we did in our relationship.
Do you remember when you first tried to hold her hand, or did she try to hold your hand first?
I made the first move. We were sitting on the couch watching a movie, and I was getting a bit nervous, and I couldn't quite concentrate on the movie. So I moved my hand over to hers, and she reciprocated and moved on from there. So.
You know, that's funny that you bring that up, because one of the most common moves that is made fun of in movies as well is when the guy takes a big yawn, a fake yawn, and he opens his arms wide and places it around the girl's shoulder and thus embraces her. But he had to do it because he yawned.
My experience, like my first hug was like that as well. So it was just a bit of an excuse I was reaching for something, and then suddenly my hand went around, and she didn't mind. So
that's
it was a
very
good sign.
good. And what about kissing? Do you kiss a lot in public, in the streets?
Rarely in public, because we find it makes other people uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's true. I find that when I see couples kissing or making out in public, I usually think to myself, why don't you get a room?
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to see that. You just want to be having a conversation with them, or you don't want them to be constantly distracted.
Exercise 4.
You've lived in 3 different parts of the world, so is there any difference between each part in terms of physical contact?
Yeah, I have lived in Hong Kong, Guam, and the U.S. Hong Kong is in Asia, Guam is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and the U.S. is American culture. So in Hong Kong, I think most people would not touch each other, just give each other a little bow. I find that a bow is very common in Asia. If you're very good friends, you wouldn't really hug. Hugging, I think, is a very American thing to do. I think you would just touch each other on the shoulder or give each other a side embrace, a mini hug. In Guam, you would definitely greet your friends and family with a kiss on the cheek. A handshake is much too formal for island culture, because island culture is so relaxed and laid back. You would only do a handshake with business partners or in a really formal setting. But usually a kiss on the cheek is what you receive and give when you see your family and friends. In the U.S., hugging is most common, I think, for friends and family. But if you're not friends and family, a handshake would probably be the most common.
Is a handshake always the same, or is there different styles of handshake?
From what I've observed, Guam has American culture, so Guam handshakes and U.S. handshakes are the same. I think in Hong Kong, it's got a British background, so that's also very similar. I don't see any difference with the handshake.
So what about young people? Is there a different way they interact physically with each other?
Yes, definitely. In Guam, I always see people do a fist bump for close buddies of theirs. Girls would definitely hug and give each other a kiss. In Hong Kong, I don't see the fist bump often. I don't think I've ever seen it at all, actually. But for close friends, I think a side embrace or a semi-embrace would happen, but mostly just some form of touch or acknowledgement of the other person. I think it's also very common for people of the same sex to hold hands in Asia and just be friends. Woman and woman hold each other's hands if they are very, very, very good friends. And it's apparently very normal. I don't know about a guy holding another guy's hand, but if a woman and a woman hold each other's hands, it does not signal that they are together as a couple. It might just signal that they are very, very good friends or sisters.
In Australia, that would be very strange.
Yes, it would, wouldn't it? Even in America and Guam.
Exercise 5.
So, Monica, you actually are a trained physical education teacher.
Yes, that's right.
So we often hear about how kids today are not fit and they don't exercise enough. Do you think that's true?
I think it is true, yes. I think kids these days spend a lot more time on the computer than they used to. So, of course, that means less time outside and getting fit.
Now, in some countries, there's a big debate about how much fitness kids actually do in school. So in your country, in New Zealand, do kids still do a lot of fitness actually in school?
Well, reasonably recently, the PE curriculum got amalgamated with the health curriculum. So PE and health were considered to be important in school. And the health side of the curriculum is often taught in the classroom, and of course the PE side is often taught outside the classroom. And there is always debate about how much kids should be doing inside school. In fact, very recently, now that it has become quite a big problem in New Zealand for teenagers, there has been talk about increasing the number of PE lessons that students have, but the current Prime Minister, I think, believes that the emphasis should be put on out-of-school activities like clubs and encouraging students to become more involved in that side of things.
What do you feel? Do you think that it should be?
I actually agree, to be honest, because I think if you increase the number of PE lessons that students have in a week, it doesn't actually necessarily increase their motivation to be involved in physical activity. But if, like he's suggesting, you increase the opportunities outside of school, students maybe become involved in a sport that they choose, that they like to do, and they hopefully can take it on as a lifetime sport, which is important.
But wouldn't the counter argument be that only kids that actually have a natural inclination to play sports will want to join those clubs, and that the kids that are more sedentary or don't enjoy physical activity won't join a club, and so you need to actually make them do fitness in school?
Yeah, that's true. That is a counter argument, and a very good one.
So I guess
to argue on some other occasion. Of course, I can talk about that side of the argument as well, if you want me to.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So, but basically, you say it's both sides make a good point.